In this video, we're going to work with ASP.NET Web Controls and Events using Visual Studio 2008. To begin, I'm going to set up a basic scenario where we wish to work with event handlers. It's going to be a case where an image on the web page is hidden and shown using two different buttons, all of which is handled through Web Controls and Events. To begin, I have a web page in Design View. When I switch to Source View, you can see that there's really nothing to this page. It's just a basic ASP.NET design structure. So in Design View, there's a control called an image control, and I'm going to drag it to our form. And that image control has a property called image URL, which you can see in the Properties panel on the right-hand side of the window. I'm going to click its little Build button and choose an image from my web folder. On the right-hand side of this page, you're seeing all the images in the folder. And there's our picture. Now right beneath the picture, I'm going to click my mouse, and I'm going to drag two button controls onto the form. It looks like I need to hit enter before I can really do that. Okay, there's our first button. Now I'm going to drag the second button. And behind the scenes in the source view, what we see is that we have an image control defined. The controls, of course, all these controls are very standard. They inherit from base objects, meaning that they have common properties that they all would automatically provide, including an ID, which is critical for working with a control on the code side of the application. A command called run@server. This is what distinguishes the tag as a server control, meaning that it should be pre-processed before anything is sent to the client. Without that run@server, things would get a little messed up on the site. Now, the only property that we set for that image was image URL. So you can see you can develop ASP.NET pages directly in the code view or the source view of the page. Or you can drag the controls in, as I've done. Either way is fine. Now, the button control, the only property we set there is we're going to set the text of each. We're going to set one to hide and the other to show. And now I'm going to save my application, which is always a good idea, and go back to Design View. Now we can see we have our two buttons called hide and show. So the next thing I'm going to do is simply to run the application so we can see what this looks like before we do anything on the code side. Now in a split second, you'll notice that my toolbar has changed. How did I do that? Well, it's sort of like a cooking show. I paused the video, changed my menus around when I realized that they really weren't that useful for what we want to do. Now, if you want to hide and show menus, you can right-click on the vertical dots at the left of a menu bar, and a menu will appear. So all I did was disable every menu except for standard. With that out of the way, I'm going to click the Start Debugging button, and this will launch the web application. As you can see, the web page has just appeared. We now have the picture of the horse, a hide button, and a show button. I'm going to click the hide button. It just rescreened. What that means is it just sent a request to the server and returned back to the client. And actually what happened behind the scenes is the event handler for the button fired, even though we haven't defined any code for that event handler. But since it didn't find anything, it just redrew the page. So we're going to add some intelligence to that button next. So I'm going to close my browser window, which will also have the effect of stopping debugging, putting us back in development mode. And we're going to show the first of two ways that you can set a button event handler. I'll double-click hide. Now I'm going to work with the controls on my page. There are two ways you can find out what controls are available. You can move to the drop list at the top left, and here you'll see a listing. Or you can type me dot, which references the current page as long as you're working within the code of a ASP.NET page. Now, anything with a blue icon to the left is a control. Anything with a purple icon to the left is a method or code routine that you can execute on behalf of the page. Anything in a little square box is a property that you can read or set depending on what property you're working with. So the control that we're working with is image 1. So I'm going to select it from the list. And I'm going to click the period character again. This displays all the properties, methods, and or objects of this control. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually set a property called visible equal to false, because we're hiding the control. Now the next thing we're going to do, I'm showing you the entire routine that was added when we double-click the button. So then the next thing I'm going to do is save my application and debug again. Anytime that you make a significant change to your application, it's a really good idea to try it right at that time, if possible. So now when I click my hide button, the horse is gone. And there's no way to get her back without starting over because we haven't built our show button yet. So with that said, we're going to work with the web application. Now we're not going to double click show because that'll just create an event handler for us, and what fun is that? We want to do it ourselves. So I'm going to switch to code view. One option for doing that is to go to the Solution Explorer and click the View Code button for the page. Now, the second way that we can add an event handler is by working with these drop-down menus in the page itself. So I'll choose Button 2, and then I'll choose an event. I'll choose the click event. And now, just as before, I'm going to type me.image1.visible, but this time I'll set it to true. It's that simple. So when I debug my example, we can hide and show this horse as long as we like. And every time we click the button, there's a server-side call that goes back to the web application, ASP.NET, and determines the way that the page should render for the user. So all we're doing is making calls to a server and rendering the static HTML output that came back from the server. It's really just smoke and mirrors. Well, I hope this basic example of events for controls has been helpful to you. Thanks and have a good day.